It's the year of the wide receiver. You have Kupp, Jefferson, Diggs dominating. I mean, we have our guy, Jaylen Waddle, going out there exploding. I'm going to be happy to talk about our updated rankings for week 3 here. We're going to go 30 deep. So just in case you weren't able to go through and draft Kupp or Stephon Diggs in the first round, we will be talking about guys like Curtis Samuel later on and where you should be expecting them this week against a tough Philadelphia Eagles matchup. But before we get into it, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to be streaming every single day until the end of the season. So if you want to be able to come out and hang out with us in a live stream, make sure you hit the bell next to the subscribe button and we'll answer every single question. And also, if you can't answer those questions in the live stream, make sure you just ask them down below, answering at least 200 questions down there in that comment section. Last but not least, this video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You'll see some player props up there in the corner as we go through and talk about these guys. If you want to go check out any of those player props, make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. And when you use promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You will also get our 2022 fantasy football rankings and getting some drafts with us during the year. But that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into tier 1 here. Cooper Kupp, number 1 overall. Justin Jefferson, number 2 overall. Stephon Diggs moving up to 3, even though maybe Gabriel Davis will be back this week. Someone we'll talk about a little later on. Jamar Chase at 4. I mean, maybe the only guy I actually need to talk about is Jamar Chase here. I've seen some people panicking on the Cincinnati Bengals offense. In reality, I think that you need to calm down. I think that this is going to be an offense that is completely fine going forward. Please do not panic. Cincinnati's going to be okay, even if they just lost to Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys. But let's go through. Let's dive into our next tier. This is going to be Davante Adams at 5. Davante Adams had a down week himself, but it is what it is. I mean, he had 17 targets week 1. Hunter Renfrow may be missing this week. If you have no Hunter Renfrow, I actually think you probably want to be moving Davante Adams up to the tier 1. Definitely still 5 spot, not moving him ahead of Jamar Chase. Going up against Tennessee, we just saw Stephon Diggs drop 3 receiving touchdowns against this defense. Davante Adams, yes, he had a small down week in week 2. He's still an elite level asset. Now let's drop it down to tier 3, where we are going to have Tyreek Hill. Tough matchup going up against Buffalo. I mean, yes, Cooper Kupp did fine against the Buffalo Bills week 1. But outside of that, this Buffalo Bills defense, possibly the best defense in the NFL, or at least close to it. But Tyreek Hill has been dominant through the first 2 weeks. Tyreek Hill has been averaging over 10 targets a week. Tua Tagovailoa just threw 6 passing touchdowns. The toughest matchup they're going to have, but I'm excited to watch that game. And we're going to have Monroe Brown at 7 here. Let me know if y'all think I'm getting too excited about Monroe Brown, but this is a wide receiver that is on pace to be this year's league winner. If you didn't draft Jaylen Waddle in the 4th, like I told you to, hopefully you drafted Monroe Brown in the 4th instead. And our next guy, Jaylen Waddle here at 8. Waddle actually had 19 targets this past week. You had more targets going in the direction of Jaylen Waddle than Tyreek Hill. But to be fair, you had Tyreek Hill drawing more volume week 1. So I think this is truly a wide receiver 1A, wide receiver 1B type situation. And here, you know, we were comparing what we had with this season Cincinnati Bengals team with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, thinking they could be what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were back in 2019 with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Well, maybe instead it's going to be the Miami Dolphins. I just could not be more excited about our guy, Jaylen Waddle here, my most drafted wide receiver in fantasy this year. And now our last wide receiver in this tier, A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, massive spike week 1. Now, you did fall back down to earth in week 2, where you had multiple rushing touchdowns for Jalen Hurts. You had him spreading the ball around just a little bit here to guys like Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith. You had Quez Watkins with the long receiving touchdown. Honestly, I think a lot of this is going to continue to happen. I think that Jalen Hurts still has that prominent role as a rushing quarterback. So maybe you assume that the passing touchdown is going to be a little bit lower in Philadelphia. I think that Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith are great talents. I think they continue to draw targets. But that Quez Watkins long touchdown, that's going to go away. I think A.J. Brown is still a bona fide stud. Top 5 receiver from a raw talent perspective. But obviously, with Jalen Hurts here, he isn't going to provide the most passing volume in the world in Philadelphia, given what he can do as a rusher. But now let's go down to our next tier. Going at 10, we are going to have Deebo Samuel against the Denver Broncos. Not the best matchup ever, but with Deebo, I am significantly more excited about him now than we were coming into this season. I wasn't even a big Deebo Samuel guy coming into the year, but losing Elijah Mitchell, losing Tyrion Davis-Price, and honestly, going back to Jimmy Garoppolo, I think that this is the best thing that could have happened for Deebo Samuel if you wanted to bet that the rushing production would still be there. If you wanted to bet that the target share would still be there with a wide receiver that's going to be operating close to the line of scrimmage. So I think it's a great spot from an offensive perspective. Now, the matchup against Denver, I don't love, but it is what it is. Great spot for Deebo. Now, our next wide receiver, Cortland Sutton at 11. I don't know how to rank Sutton here. The back-to-back guys, Sutton and Mike Williams going to be in these rankings. Of course, I'm going to give you updates later on in the week, but it looks like Jerry Jeudy right now is going to be day-to-day. With Mike Williams, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Keenan Allen and the hamstring. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Justin Herbert. So these are two very polarizing players. I think this is where you rank them if Jerry Jeudy and Keenan Allen miss this week. However, if Jerry Jeudy and Keenan Allen look like they're good to go, look like they are going to play, then we will be moving Sutton and Mike Williams down these rankings, and we'll give you that update later in the week. So just make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell next to the sub button. But now our last wide receiver in this tier, going up against the Jets. I just think this is going to be a massive bounce back spot here for the Cincinnati Bengals. I know that, yes, Cincinnati's look bad. I know people are panicking. The offensive line hasn't looked great. Joe Burrow's not getting the ball out fast enough. But still, the Jets defense, not great. I think this is a get-right game, very similar to what we said about the Los Angeles Rams a week ago. I don't know. I want to be buying the dip on these Cincinnati players. And then our next guy is going to be Michael Pittman. With Michael Pittman obviously dealing with the quad, I think this could be a game where Matt Ryan's forced to throw the ball very often like he did a week ago. Obviously, a week ago he failed, but I think that was clearly because you didn't have Michael Pittman. You didn't have Alec Pierce in this offense. So it's very difficult to get things going when you're throwing the ball to Ashton Doolin and Paris Campbell. And I am saying this as someone who told you not to buy into the Michael Pittman as a top 10 wide receiver hype because I didn't think Michael Pittman was getting that massive quarterback upgrade from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan like everyone thought. But at the same time, I don't want to sit here and go, ha, 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 I told you so, because that's unfair to do. You did not have Michael Pittman. You did not have Alec Pierce in Indianapolis a week ago. So even if I wasn't a big Matt Ryan guy coming into the season, I think he's still probably what people thought he was. And in this matchup against Kansas City, they're going to have to throw the ball. And now our next wide receiver, Hollywood Brown, going up against the Rams here. Obviously, you don't like going up against Ramsey, but hell, Stephon Diggs, great week 1. Drake London, great week 2. I think that here, Hollywood should still see the expanded target share and an offense that's going to look to push the pace of play. He has to be a must-start guy for you every single week until we get DeAndre Hopkins back. And now our next wide receiver going to be Michael Thomas, 16. With Michael Thomas, this is also going to be a ranking that needs to be updated later in the week. If Alvin Kamara misses, I am probably moving Michael Thomas up to that same tier of guys like T. Higgins, Mike Williams. If Alvin Kamara plays, I think maybe he drops down behind our next guy in Gabriel Davis. But of course, I'm going to give you this update later this week. And now our next receiver, Gabriel Davis, 17. With Davis, we're waiting. We don't know if he's going to play with Davis. I wasn't a big-time Gabriel Davis fan because we had Jerry Jeudy. We had our guy Jaylen Waddle ranked out of him. But it is what it is. If you drafted him at the 3-4 turn, I think you liked what you saw week 1, even if you only had 5 targets. Clearly, he's playing in what should be the best offense in the NFL. Looking at what the Buffalo Bills did week 1, looking at what they did week 2, it's hard not to go through and try to get every piece of this passing offense you can. Now, dropping down a tier, Christian Kirk here at 18. I know you're probably going to be mad at me for having Christian Kirk this low, but come on. I had Christian Kirk on our buy low wide receiver video last week. Like, I like Christian Kirk here, but in reality, I don't want to overreact. He only had 6 targets. The game script was not in his favor. I know we have a lot of people in the comment section going, okay, well, we bought low on him last week. Are we selling high for the profit this? No, because I think going up against the Chargers, this is now a game where the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be forced to throw the ball in the second half where they didn't have to be aggressive last week against Indianapolis. So Christian Kirk, mid-wide receiver 2. Congrats if you drafted him, but I don't think we can start ranking him as a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 until we get a couple more consistent weeks from him in Jacksonville. Now our next receiver, Diontae Johnson, going up against Cleveland. Cleveland Browns just let up a big game to Garrett Wilson here. Diontae Johnson, everybody was afraid. Everybody was terrified. of Ben Roethlisberger no longer being his quarterback, try to figure out, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Is he going to have the same target share? Well, Diontae Johnson has had 23 targets so far through the first 2 weeks. He's still averaging over 10 targets a game, just like we saw a year ago. Diontae, plug-and-play guy in a PPR format. Our next guy is CeeDee Lamb. We said to start him last week. I think you got to start him this week as well. I understand Cooper Rush is going to be very bad. Like we said, it's kind of like Brandon Cooks. They're both wide receivers. And by the way, Brandon Cooks is our next guy here. They're both wide receivers that are in horrendous offenses. But at the same time, they're going to be seeing every single target in said offense. And they are extremely talented players. So I think they're players with high floors but cap ceilings, just because their quarterback play, just because their overall offensive context isn't great. But our next guy, 22 here, is going to be Rashod Bateman. With Bateman, if you wanted to move him to the top of this tier, I'm fine with it. Now, I don't know if we could go through and start ranking Rashod Bateman over someone like Gabriel Davis, over Michael Thomas. Like, that's where it gets a little bit aggressive. I don't think you have as many points scored by the Baltimore Ravens this week going up against the New England Patriots in a tough matchup. But with Rashod Bateman, back-to-back long receiving touchdowns, obviously, you're very excited if you drafted him. I do wonder how sustainable this is, though, because obviously we're expecting Mark Andrews to be this top passing down option in Baltimore. Now, our last wide receiver in this tier, Jerry Jeudy. Ranking Jerry Jeudy down here, even though y'all know coming into the season, I was a Jerry Jeudy over Cortland Sutton guy. I was a Jerry Jeudy's the wide receiver one here. Don't disrespect him. However, if he's going to be dealing with an injury, I think we have to lower our expectations for Jeudy. I think you have to move up Cortland Sutton. Don't know if he's going to be playing yet. We're going to have to monitor the practice reports this week. And as I said, with so many of these guys, we'll be giving you the update later on this week. And now let's drop it down to our next tier players where we're going to have DJ Moore here going up against the New Orleans Saints. Don't love the matchup for DJ Moore. Obviously, this isn't a great spot. This is a very good Saints defense. Look at how they just limited the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With DJ Moore, Baker Mayfield has not looked good. I mean, it looks like the touchdowns are going to be hard to come by in Carolina. Now, yes, DJ Moore scored last week, but still, you got too many targets going over to Robbie Anderson, in my opinion, for DJ Moore to be a wide receiver that we're just confident about being a high-end wide receiver too. I think we got to be a little bit worried here. And now our next receiver in this year is going to be Drake London. With Drake London here going up against the Seattle Seahawks, the man's a monster, okay? He was our #1 wide receiver going into the NFL draft, checked every single box, legitimately broke out at 17 years old. He started his true freshman season at USC at 17 years old. He had a role immediately in this offense when Michael Pittman Jr. was a senior at USC. And you had Monroe Brown as a sophomore. Drake London to go through to break out early on in college like that among that top level competition. He's an elite level prospect, checks every single box that we looked for. And now this past week, he had 12 targets out of the 25 pass attempts for Marcus Mariota. If Marcus Mariota's throwing the ball, there's about a 50-50 chance that ball's going over for Drake London. Don't love the matchup. I do think that this is going to be a very low scoring contest in general. But dear God, you got to get excited about Drake London. And now our last tier guys here is going to be led off with Juju Smith-Schuster going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Now with Juju here, I get it. Yes, very disappointing week ago. And I got to sit here and take my L. With Juju, I called him a must start guy. We were looking at 8 targets week 1 for Juju Smith-Schuster in a blowout game against the Arizona Cardinals. I was like, okay, if you're getting 8 targets from who I believe to be maybe the best quarterback in the NFL with Patrick Mahomes here, we got to go through and we got to start you every single. Disappointed week 2. I think that he is going to be that high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2, and you're just trying to get a piece of this Kansas City Chiefs offense. As it hasn't looked like MVS, McCole Hardman, or Sky Moore are going to have very large roles here. And now our next receiver going to be Terry McLaurin. With Terry McLaurin, I'm very worried about what we have right now. I understand Carson Wentz has looked great. And I drafted Carson Wentz in a decent amount of deep best ball leagues. Now, in a shallow redraft format, I don't want any part of Carson Wentz. But in a deep best ball, hell yeah. Now, that being said, this is an offense that has Jahan Dotson emerging, Logan Thomas back and healthy, the running backs drawing targets, Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel. For these players to be productive, You need 300 passing yards from Carson Wentz. We've gotten that through the first 2 weeks against Jacksonville and Indianapolis, where Carson Wentz right now is second in the NFL in passing. But can we remember what Sam Darnold did through the first month of the year last year? I think we kind of have a decent idea of who Carson Wentz is. I want to be shorting this Washington Commanders offense if we can. Now, our next wide receiver is going to be Allen Robinson. I think that is going to be a great matchup here going up against Arizona. I think that this could potentially be the highest scoring game of the week, as we already discussed. But in reality, with Allen Robinson, he has gotten crushed by Tyler Higbee with targets through the first 2 weeks here in Los Angeles. So I may personally want to go through, see if we can move off A-Rob. Now, our next receiver going to be Curtis Samuel. With Samuel, very similar to Terry McLaurin. I understand why you want to get excited, but if there are going to be 3 receivers, a tight end, and a couple running backs that we're excited about, you need a quarterback throwing the ball for 300 passing yards, which is what we've had in Washington through the first few weeks. I don't know if this keeps up, though. Like I said, I know a lot of people are viewing Curtis Samuel as a must-start guy going forward. I don't love the matchup against Philadelphia. I'm just going to be lower on these guys than average, and I'm going to be fine with that as well. If Curtis Samuel comes out, Curtis Samuel drops 25 points this week, I'll take my L. I'll happily take that L. And now our next receiver going to be DK Metcalf going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Great matchup for DK Metcalf, but obviously Seattle just looks like a train wreck at this point. Looks like possibly the worst offense in the NFL, horrendous offensive line. Tyler Lockett had himself a day this past week. I do think that DK Metcalf's the wide receiver 1 going forward, though. And then I will throw one extra guy here for you. I think we can go Brandon Ayuk 31. With Ayuk, I'm fine with Jimmy Garoppolo coming over. I think Jimmy G definitely helps Deebo Samuel more than he helps Brandon Ayuk, if I'm going to be honest. Don't love the matchup against the Denver Broncos. I feel like all these wide receivers, 26 through 31, you could rank in almost any order you want. But please let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section. Of course, feel free to tell me I'm stupid. Feel free to tell me what I should change. We'll be giving that update later this week. So just make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell next to the subscribe button. Thank you again. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you get to see you with the live stream tonight.